Right, very good. So we should be recording. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this Saturday morning to prepare for the fall conference next weekend. Just a few announcements to start off and kind of give an overview of the conference itself. Right now, everyone's muted as they come into the meeting. That's the way it will be in the business session. And then we'll talk about raising the hand feature to ask questions. So first, we want to announce that there is a silent auction starting now online. You can see the link in front of you. It'll be in the announcements, Mission Center, social media as well. We have several items that were made at youth camps this summer by the participants, and we'll have those available for auction online throughout the week. You can place your bids. If you click that link that's here, and I will send these slides out. They'll be posted. You'll get the recap of today as well, along with all delegates. To place a bid online, if you're not coming in person all week until Friday at 5 o'clock, take bids and go click the link, see the item, see the current bid, and place your own. And then Saturday here at Blue Water, those in person will have a chance to increase the bids we have so far online. If not, the online bidder will earn the item. So online bids through Friday night at 5 o'clock, and then in-person bids at Blue Water until next Saturday at 2. And then in the afternoon session, we'll announce all the auction winners and make arrangements to get your items. So check those out. Our fall conference this year is following the theme Courageously Challenge. This comes from Doctrine and Covenants 163.3b. We've been using that at Mission Center gatherings throughout the year, and we'll continue to use that. So you can expect in some of our sessions, especially on Saturday afternoon and Sunday morning, we'll talk about some ways that we can challenge trends according to Doctrine and Covenants scripture. As far as conference preparation goes, first session is today. You're here, thank you. And then we'll have another one Friday evening. We'll do a welcome for the overall conference. Some people will be joining in person then. We'll have another chance to go over the agenda items, ask any additional questions, test everything out. We want everyone to be fully prepared to participate in the meeting on Saturday morning. So preparing today, if you want to come again next Friday evening, that session will be streaming on Facebook for any guests. Only delegates will be let into the meeting. So as I said, Saturday morning is the business session. We plan to start sharply at 8:30 with business. So that would mean please start joining as early as 8 o'clock. It does help us if you're online or in person to start arriving at 8 o'clock, get checked in, make sure your name is there correctly, connection's working. You can then turn off your sound and video and wait until the meeting starts. But if you can get in the meeting room, that's very helpful so that we don't have everyone trying to join at once. It takes a long time to check the delegate list. For those coming in person, there will be cinnamon rolls and coffee provided for a donation to the youth camp ministries. So come on early for that, nothing else. Get checked in. Hopefully we're all ready to go at 8:30. We plan our business to go until about 12:30, depending on debate and amendments and everything else. And then we'll have a lunch break for about an hour and a half. And then our afternoon session will be a presentation. We have Carla Wong from the presiding bishopric, our Apostle Locke Mackay, and myself. Will be sharing and guiding the group through some dialogue and question time. Reminders Saturday night or very early Sunday morning, daylight savings times end. So fall back an hour on your clock. This always hits our conference weekend, which is nice for those of us working all day, but keep that in mind for Sunday morning. We'll start at 9 a.m. with presentations about next year's priorities, calendar, goals. And then we'll probably have a break at about 10:30 to prepare for worship starting at 11. That will include celebrating communion. So if you're joining online, prepare bread and juice wherever you are. And the Saturday afternoon and Sunday morning sessions will be a separate Zoom link. They'll be open to everyone. They'll be on the fall conference website. We'll send it out to all delegates, registered, and guests. So you'll have that. I should note that the link you're using today, you got by your email, it's not going to be the same link next Saturday. We're using a different Zoom account due to another meeting that's happening. So you'll get a new email and link for Friday night and Saturday morning business session. So no need to save this one, just wait for that new email to come out to you next week for the conference. For conference youth, we do want to have a space available here for those coming in person to Blue Water in the morning, again, starting at 8 o'clock up through 12:30. Childcare available up to 5th grade. Do need to register for that by today, so we have enough staff to help with that and get that arranged. So if you're coming in person, you're planning to bring a youth with you, you want them to be over in the childcare area in the lodge, please register by today so we have everything prepared. There are no other youth activities online or outside of the childcare during the business session this year. Okay, so we're going to walk through today the items on the agenda for the conference, talk about them, and there'll be time to practice how to participate and vote, speak, etc. So in your, I should mention on the fall conference website, if you didn't already get them, there is a preparation packet for today. Got 15 pages of handouts. It just has all of the business items. The full conference packet that will have all the reports and details hopefully will come out Monday to you. We'll send that out by email and get it posted to the website. But today we're just looking at the business items themselves, what we'll be voting on, not the report. So it's a smaller packet. The first item of business for a conference is to adopt the credentials reports. That's not on your screen. I did send that out to all of you as of yesterday. The delegates reported and then highlighted in green for those of you who had registered. So if you see somebody on there from your congregation or someone you know who's not yet registered online, please give them a nudge to do that as soon as possible. Very helpful for us to set everything up in our ballots ahead of time. So that vote will just be our first test of our voting system. It's a majority vote to approve the credentials. Then the second step is to approve standing rules. These haven't changed since the last two conferences that we've had hybrid. The only difference is we no longer have a note about the emergency use of electronic meetings because it is now in Community of Christ bylaws that we can do this since the World Conference. So the rules are all the same. We just took that note out of there. I don't think I'll read through them verbatim. We'll just kind of, again, the first one is that the Credentials Committee will register delegates. We've got to check everyone off individually to make sure they are a delegate. So that's why it's important to start logging in at 8 o'clock and know that it may take 5 or 10 minutes to get checked in. So if you're in the waiting room, as long as your first and last name are showing for your account, you will get checked in. Just be patient. But I'll highlight that now. I'm looking down through the list. I do see a couple of phone numbers, iPad. So look at your name in the participants menu or on your screen and make sure it shows your first and last name. Today, we weren't checking in detail, so there are a few in here, but on Saturday morning for business session, we'll have people asking you if you're in the waiting room to give us your full first and last name so we know that only the correct people are entering the business meeting. And that follows up on that. Members shall identify themselves as required to get into the meeting, shall sign out if you leave early. Just if you completely leave, you're welcome to go to other places as people are here. But if you fully disconnect, sign out. If something happens with the connection, that does not prevent the participation in the meeting. So unfortunately, with electronic meetings, you have to maintain that connection. And if you don't, it's just like you went to the restroom or left the conference session in person. The meeting will continue without you. You can reconnect, but know that nothing will stop if that happens. And if there's an interference, the chair can mute the connection or remove the person from the meeting. For debate, the limit is 3 minutes, unless there's a 2/3 vote to extend that, except for the first person speaking for and against. They're provided 5 minutes for speeches. Again, this is debate. For or against a motion. Questions, information are not governed by that time limit. So let's talk about debating, speaking, asking a question. Right now, all the connections are muted and you're not able to unmute yourself. In order to speak or ask a question, you need to raise your hand. So now's the time to look and find that. You can move around on different versions or different tablets, phones, iPads. So go ahead and look for the raise hand feature, test it out. You should be able to lower your hand also when you're done. Feel free to go ahead and try that right now. I won't call anyone yet. It just lets you find that feature wherever your Zoom controls are. It might be under your reactions. It might be under your participant menu. Okay, the chair's going to clear all the feedback. That just allows me to take down all the hands. So if we were on, say, an amendment or some other thing that passes or fails, we would clear all the feedback for that motion and go back to our next item. But I will now start taking people who want to speak or ask a question. Go ahead and raise your hand and then I'll call on you. Chair recognizes Gary Villeneuve.
No, I don't have any question at this point. I was just finding the reaction with a hand.
Okay, thanks, Gary. Dick Pennington.
Good morning, Dan. Nice to see you.
Hi, Dick. And you will notice that when you raise your hand, when you're called on, I'll click the button to ask you to unmute. And at that point, you'll see the host is asking you to unmute. You'll have to click that in order to speak, just like Gary and Dick just did. Just a note here I'm making for myself, and I'm going to share with you that in the chat, we're going to turn it the settings so that participants will only be able to chat with the host and co-host. So that'll likely be myself and Linda Stanbridge doing tech, and we'll try to have someone offsite as well in case we have a malfunction here or something happens. That'll just cut down. It may be open during the a waiting time, but once the meeting starts, you won't be able to see chats from each other or chat with one another. We've had that feedback that can be distracting, and people in person can't see all those chats. So just like you are in the meeting, you're not able to talk to one another while we're doing business. You'll only be able to message the hosts for technical questions. On the screen, I haven't tested these out, but I know in previous versions, Alt-Y would allow you to raise your hand if you can't find the button. And then those joining by phone, *9 used to be the option to get your hand raised to show up by phone. Hopefully you figured that out. Again, this would be to ask a question at any point during the conference. Or to speak. Ideally, when we're in debate, it would be helpful, and we can try this now. Somewhere near your raised hand, there should be a green check mark and a red X mark. And it would be helpful during debate if you want to speak, if you could check either the green to be for the resolution or red to be against it. And that'll help me as the chair know when we try to alternate between for and against, which side you'd like to speak on. And it'll also help me distinguish between questions and people who want to just speak. So you can look for those options and go ahead and try them out now. it's helpful to see if you are wanting to speak for or against a motion, to use the green check mark or the red X mark. I get a number then of people who've registered on each side, so I can see, right now they're 8, 4, and 3 against. It's changing as you try this out. But that tells me how many people do want to speak on each side, so I can know there's a speech for or against, and then I can scroll down the list and select people alternating. And we'll try to have the same thing here at Blue Water, 1 line for, 1 line against, so we can see that and go back and forth. I'll try to remember to share that every time we're in debate, that we want yes and no's registered to speak. You could still raise your hand if you just had a question or had a different motion and didn't want to debate. Okay, so I see lots of people trying that out. That's good. I'll try to clear that. And if you have any questions about the yes, no buttons or speaking in debate, raise your hand and I will call on you. See any, so we'll try to move on beyond speaking. The next standing rules are ones we've had for many years. The Mission Center budget shall be considered as a whole. This means the financial officer gives the proposal and then the body can change line items, but it has to be voted on as a whole budget that has to be balanced. The Mission Center president formulates the agenda, but it's only for guidance. It means we can take things out of order if needed or change things. A motion for previous question, that means to close debate, take a vote immediately, only applies to the immediate question unless otherwise noted. So if we have a resolution, an amendment, and a motion to refer to a committee, and we're talking about referring to committee and someone moves previous question, it only applies to the referral to committees. So if there's 2/3 who want to end debate, call previous question, we would vote right away on referring to a committee. If that passes, everything would go to the committee. If it failed, we'd go back to the amendment and debate would continue, since that only applied to the immediately pending question. Number 7, business may be conducted by unanimous consent. That means there's no objections. It doesn't mean everyone agrees with it. It just means no one objects to the action. Maybe 1 or 2 people disagree, but they know there's no need to have a vote on the item. So in those cases, usually for minor items, the chair would ask, is there any objection? Hearing none, it's adopted to do whatever the item is. Often we do this with the minutes review committee or some other kind of procedural things during the conference. For items that we want to vote on, the chair could conduct a voice vote. It's not practical and hybrid, because all of you on Zoom can't really speak at once and we can't hear the volume. So we won't do those. You can also use a rising vote or a hand vote or a ballot. So let me pull up. I believe we've got a poll ready to try out a vote. This is usually our best way to vote. Okay, just give me a second. I created them in the regular business session and now I'm in a different account. So I'll create one real quick. All right, I've just launched a poll on standing rules. My question is, shall the standing rules be adopted? So you should now be seeing a poll on your screen, and this is how you would vote for those of you joining online. This means everyone who's online needs to have a connection to Zoom in order to vote. So you need a phone, a tablet, a computer. You don't have to turn on the screen. So if, I know there's some places where people are gathering at a congregation or maybe a family member's home. You can all watch the Zoom in one spot, but each person who's a delegate is going to need to connect. So we see your name and you'll be able to see these polls to vote on motions. So when we have a resolution or something like this, when you'll be able to be voting. So I see about 21 responses right so far. We've got 46 participants. So hopefully more of you can try this out. Vote either way. We're just testing this out. I don't know how it shows up on every phone, tablet, or computer, but I know the poll is running and up to almost everyone participating. And those coming in person will use the small voting devices that we've used for many years in conferences. Okay, are there any questions about the polling? Does anybody have any difficulty voting on the poll? Raise your hand if you want to ask a question. Okay, I don't see any questions. I'm going to end the poll and share the results so you can see what that looks like. In the session, we won't share these results because we'll have to add to it the voting numbers here, and I'll just announce the total. So I will see them here. We'll add to it what we have in the room, and then we'll announce the total yes and no's and what happens with the motion. Yes, Deb Brew.
Hi, the thing said that I did not basically vote, and I did. It said that I did not answer the question, but I voted.
That's what showed up on your screen when I shared the results.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll try another one here before we're done and see if that happens again. Thank you. So to continue with voting, again, unanimous consent for basic procedural items. Voice votes are an option, but they won't work for us, so we won't use them. Hand votes, again, won't work as far as showing a hand. We could do it with a showing of hands, but the problem with just raising hands on each side is that it's there's a delay sometimes. We could use the yes, no buttons just like we do for debate. And that's an option if we find polling doesn't work. We'll ask everyone to vote yes, no, and then totals do come up on our screen here. So that's a backup option, but we'd rather have the polling, presuming it works for everyone, then you can cast your answer. And those are then anonymous, just like the voting devices are in person. Whereas the yes, no voting, you can see by each person's name. Our final option then for a ballot, if we need one, which should only be for the 3 campground boards, is to use the site we've been using for several years, electionbuddy.com. And I'll come back to that in just a moment. The final note is that all conferences in Community of Christ operate under Robert's Rules of Order, newly revised. So once we start the conference, we'll have that credentials report. That'll be our first test vote using a poll and the clickers. We'll then go through the standing rules. If there are any amendments, we'll deal with those. Once amended, we'll take a final vote just like we did. Those require 2/3 vote to adopt. And then our first item is going to be a special order that we want to take up right away, which is campground board nominations and elections. We do that because we need to get the nominees and ballot ready to use later in the meeting. So we'll start right away with taking any other nominations. Then I will turn the chair over to the Northeast field leaders for some presentations, and while they're sharing, I will update the ballot with any additional nominees. So I had a question in the chat to explain again voting if people are using the same computer. If you're watching on the same computer and speaking on that computer, whoever's logged in there can vote on that computer. The second person will need to log into Zoom with some other device, a phone, a tablet, another computer. They don't have to turn on the camera. They don't have to have another email address. Click the same link that you get, but you just have to use a second device to enter the meeting, and that way you can see the poll when it comes up. So every person who wants to vote in the polling will have to connect to Zoom themselves. For campground board elections, timed this pretty well. You should be getting an email any moment now. There's a test election that was scheduled to go out at 9:30 a.m. We're right on time. So everyone who registered so far was entered into that to receive a ballot by election if you had an email address. We'll get back to those who don't have an email address in a second. So you may have to check your spam. It should come through saying Michigan Mission Center as the name, but the actual sender is electionbuddy.com. And it's going to invite you to participate in a sample fall conference election. And right now it's just got candidate A, B, C, D. This ballot is set up to, we enter in all the nominees. We'll preset it with everyone who nominates in advance. Anyone who nominates from the floor, we'll type that in real quick while Locke and Dina are speaking, and then we'll send out the ballot. Each board has 5 seats, so you can vote up to 5 times, but you don't have to vote all 5 votes. You don't have to vote at all. You can vote in some elections or not others. The candidate names get randomly listed on each ballot. So there's a different list for every person who pulls it up, so be careful to look at the names. They're not in any set order on the ballot. Even the people attending in person will be asked to vote through their email. So if they bring their phone or tablet, anytime once they get that email, they're asked to complete that vote. For those who do not have an email address to get a ballot sent, we have to send out a ballot code separately. So if you're joining from another site, you'll need to be with someone who can access the computer and enter your vote. Again, we can email that second code to the same email address. So if it's partners together who share one email address, one code will go immediately to the email address on file, and then I will have a list to send a second code outside the system to that same email address. So you can vote twice using that email. For those in person, if you don't have an email address, we'll have paper ballots that you can take, cast your vote. We'll check off your name that you got a ballot, but your ballot will be anonymous, and then we just enter those in to the system. So this test election was set for 9:30, so hopefully it's going out. There's a couple hundred of them going, so it might take a while to go through servers. It'll be open until Friday night at 10 o'clock, I believe. So you have all week to try it. And when we do our next preparation session Friday evening, it'll still be open. So anybody who hasn't gotten it yet or hasn't figured it out, we can still take those questions. So I'm not going to look at the ballot yet because it will take a little bit of time, but later in our prep session, we'll come back to that. If you still haven't received it, I'll take a note of who might be having an issue, see what I can find on our end, and I can send reminders throughout the week. I mentioned there are 5 director positions each year elected to 3-year terms. Our boards have 15 people total. The position requirements are posted on the Fall Conference website. Please review those operating policies if you plan to be a nominee, and submit your nominations in advance. The link is still open for that. The people who have submitted their nominations are listed here, and their brief bio is in the prep packet, and it'll be in the full packet. For Blue Water, we have 5 seats. Right now, we have 3 nominees, Kelly Christian, Russell Knight, and Jody Porter. Park of the Pines, 5 positions. There are currently 5 nominees, Ruthie Eaton, Alicia Ecker, Andrea Johnson, Holly Ormsby, Anita Wilson. And for Sanford, currently 3 nominees, Daryl Bechtel, Heidi Kleinhardt, Audra Swarthout. So again, if you want to add your name as a nominee, please do that online. We won't get all the information printed necessarily, but at least we can get the ballots created and save some time in the conference. So there are still 2 more nominees needed for Blue Water and Sanford. If we have 5 or less nominees, we'll take that vote either by unanimous consent or with a clicking poll. If we have more than 5, we'll then use the ballot system. Other than not maybe seeing the ballot yet in your email, are there any questions about the ballot system or campground board elections? Okay. I'll just remind people again, we do get questions often. How do we know, who to vote for on a board or how to assess these candidates? And we've done our best to collect a standard list of demographics and an opportunity for a personal response. But again, I just remind the conference, you do not have to vote for every board. You can vote for only the boards you're familiar with or interested in, and you don't have to use all 5 of your votes. So you can vote for 1 or 2 or 3 candidates if those are the only people you know or want to elect to the board. The elections are by plurality, so it's the most vote getters, the top 5 are elected. Our next item on the agenda is reports of officers and staff. The first will come from me as Mission Center President. I have several highlights in my written report, and I'll spend just a few minutes talking about some important items with the conference for updates. Primary of those will be talking about where we are as a church, and that's going to be the focus of Saturday afternoon for us to go really more in depth with Carla, Locke, and myself. But we all want to be honest that we realize there are declining trends in membership, givers, money, congregations, etc. We live that, we see that, and so we need to talk about that with one another and what that looks like for us moving forward. We have good things happening as well, but the trends, not just for Community of Christ, but all organized religion, are not in a positive direction from an institutional standpoint. So I'll try my best to share about that, and we'll have more time to talk about it through the weekend. One resolution will come out of my report, and that's before you now is Resolution 1. We'll just read the resolve clause, and then we can take questions. There are whereas paragraphs and additional information in the prep session packet, but this is what you're voting on for action. Resolve that the Michigan Mission Center gift $100,000 from the operating investment fund to the Bridge of Hope project, and resolve that after the initial Bridge of Hope funding goal is met, congregations are encouraged to make gifts from reserves, surplus income, bequests, property sale net proceeds, special offerings, or other income sources when possible to replenish and grow the Michigan Mission Center operating investment fund to provide principal that can generate earnings to support the annual operating budget into the future. So we're not going to debate the resolution, but we want to take any questions you have about this proposal. Jessica Montague is here if you have any financial details we need, and I'd be glad to talk about any of the language or what's happening here. Laretha? Laretha, you'll have to unmute. You see.
That money there, is that what we're supposed to give at a yearly? I remember that every mission center was to give so much. Is that what ours is, that much?
So this is just a one-time gift that we're proposing. The Michigan Mission Center has not given a gift from its cash assets yet to date as a mission center. So congregations and individuals have given, and we have given from net proceeds of campgrounds and building sales, but we've not given from our assets.
Oh,
So
okay.
every congregation that had not yet given a gift, either through an offering or something, and every mission center was asked to do that, so that there was hopefully 100% participation from everyone to give an actual gift from their cash or an offering. So we were asked along with others, and this was the recommended amount for us. Again, one-time gift. This is to meet the final goal at the end of this year. Overall, I don't have the totals with me on how much the Mission Center has given through net assets, but we've given through several of those. So as a body, you can say no to this, just no gift at all. You could change that amount from 100,000 to a different amount. Or you could say, we don't want to give an amount, but we'll take an offering, at fall conference or some other time as a mission center. But this was the most direct and quickest route. I believe every other mission center in our field has given a gift of some amount up to this point from their cash or investments.
Thank you.
And Dina will be with us. She'll be sharing, as I mentioned, right before my report. So we'll get the up-to-date numbers from her on where the Bridge of Hope is at overall and in our field. But we believe, at least as things were tracking, and I know congregations got the same request that we did, and many of them have responded this fall with some amount of gift, any of those that hadn't given yet. So I believe we're on track to meet the goal in our field or be very close to it by the end of the year. And overall, the church is on track to meet that first goal for funding the retirement. We'll hear from Dina for sure, but we don't expect any of the minimum balances will have to be taken out of investment pools or any congregation will have to give any loans. We'll get that update next Saturday. Dick Pennington?
Dan, isn't there something else coming up that I was reading yesterday that I think it's in Jessica's report where we're proposing to give some other amount to the Bridge of Hope, and it was 4% of an amount, and if I calculated it right, it's going to be another 40,000 or something like that.
What you might be seeing is that the fund we're proposing the $100,000 comes from the operating investment fund. That fund is what we use for the line item in our budget at a 4% spending rate. So on the additional information on the resolution, the investment fund balance as of January 1st this year was just over $1 million. So I think what Jessica's report indicated is if this resolution is approved, we would lose $100,000 or decrease our balance by $100,000, which means we'd have $4,000 less to go into the budget at the 4% rate. So if this is approved, in theory, we'd have $4,000 less income on an annual basis. However, that's the second part of the resolution, is to replenish that $100,000 through future sales or gifts. We do continue to receive some of those gifts through building sales in addition to what goes to Bridge of Hope. So we have based our proposed budget on what we expect the fund balance to be at the end of the year, even with this $100,000 being approved. So I think that's what you would have saw, is that Jessica may have mentioned that the proposed budget amount for investment income is planned with this $100,000 not being in our balance. If we don't give the gift, then in theory, we could draw another $4,000 of income from this fund. Did that answer the question, Dick? Okay, I don't see any other questions. So the next item after that resolution from the president's report is the financial officer's report. And Jessica's report will have two action items. The first is considering the inspection for last year's financials. And then the second is adopting the budget for next year's financials. The inspection report was just completed, see October 25th, so it was not in the preparation packet. It was emailed out to all of you. It'll be in the conference packet. It is before you there. It's pretty straightforward. It's a one-page letter that says all the procedures have been applied to inspect the records, and there were no concerns noted. Jack Tigner, many of you know, bishop and former financial officer for us, does our inspection now that the World Church does not have an auditor. And so that's his letter. And then there is the budget statement from 2022 that's been final and inspected. You'll see for 2022, there was a net loss just over $9,000. That means our operating reserve, which is separate from the investment fund, came down $9,000. And then there's our full balance sheet with all of our funds for 2022 that have been reviewed. So you'll be asked to approve or not approve of this report. Are there any questions on the 2022 inspection report? Not really much we can do. It is the final numbers and it's been inspected, so. We'll move on then. The next item will be the proposed budget for 2024. The numbers are on your screen. The narrative that explains each line item, at least briefly, is in your packet. So if you have questions about the line items, you can read through those, and we'll also take them now. Overall, we're proposing a budget that increases by $4,000 from this year's budget to next year. Those expense increases are in the line items for insurance, salaries and benefits, payroll processing, communications are the ones that have gone up slightly. For income, you'll see we're expecting less income from congregations. We have fewer congregations. We've budgeted the same amount of offering contributions as last year. And that was an amount that was amended and adopted by the conference last year. So we've kept that the same. We are increasing the amount of earnings from investment support. Again, that's based on what we expect that balance to be. And Jessica's comments will be that we'll be spending a little bit more than the recommended 4%, depending on where the exact balance ends up. But we feel confident it's still a pretty conservative approach. The other income lines stay the same. What questions would you like to ask about the line items or any of the amounts that are proposed? see anyone with a hand raised. See a chat question. You stated previously that the $4,000 change is included in the proposal. Yes, so that line item of $54,000 for investment earnings for mission support is based on what we believe the operating investment fund balance will be, spending at probably closer to a 5% rate rather than a 4% rate. So we're pretty confident the balance will stay at 100,000 or $1 million, probably a little over that once earnings from this year and other things settle. And we think that 54,000 is a reasonable number, even with the 100,000 being gifted. So Litha?
Yeah, I was just looking at the expenses line, the very first item. It says financial review, $250 in the 23 budget, nothing in the 224 budget, nothing in the 2022 budget. I guess I'm a little confused.
Yes, so this was a change from the church policy. We used to be required to submit financial records for mission centers to the auditing department at World Church. That position was left vacant after Gary Dodson passed away, and the church changed to a model of financial reviews done locally. So that was in 2022 is the first year that we received that news. And we figured it out. We still had it in the budget for 2023 because we didn't know how that would all work out at the time, but we didn't end up needing it in 2023 either. And so going forward, we just don't have the expense anymore.
Okay, thank you.
That assumes we continue to find a volunteer to do that for us. And we just saw Jack Tigner has been willing to. Some other mission centers switch. So financial officer reviews one mission center and they switch books for each other, or within a field they trade. So there are other options if Jack wasn't able to, but we expect we'll be able to have a volunteer do that going forward. Okay, this will require a majority vote to approve. Again, it's open to change the line items. I will say, though, the congregation support line is relatively fixed because those commitments have already been approved by congregations. Congregations could go and approve more, but this is what's been reported to us. Other items also are based on our best estimates, but we can dialogue if changes are requested. Continuing on in our meeting then will be the other reports of staff, Mission Center Invitation Support Minister. We'll have a presentation briefly about new expressions and some other activities, and then Camping and Gathering Coordinator. We'll talk about our summer camp program this year and maybe a couple things about next year, but mostly our next year presentation will take place on Sunday morning. We'll continue with reports from the campground boards. I'll each have a couple of minutes to share some highlights in addition to what they printed. And then we'll have committee and team reports, our spectacular delegation, diversity team, and our stewardship team. We do have a resolution coming from the Earth Stewardship team, so that will be our second resolution. That's before you now, so I'll read those paragraphs and then we can take questions. Resolve that menus for Michigan Mission Center events such as camps, retreats, and other gatherings be transitioned to offer primarily plant-based options with any meat, dairy, eggs, or other animal products included to be offered sparingly and from responsibly raised local sources. And resolve that the Earth Stewardship team provide resources to help educate and encourage congregations and individuals on how to transition menus and diets to be primarily plant-based. In your packet, there are additional resources listed under that. So there is a a packet of resources from the Earth Stewardship team specifically on this resolution. There was also a dialogue session held earlier this month on the resolution, and that's recorded. So you can go view that recording. And there are a couple of scriptures listed, and then in the fall conference report, there'll be, some highlights as well. But there is a full packet to go read about this more. So I want to make sure you're aware of that. And now we can open it up for questions you have about the resolution. Gary, go to your.
Yes, and I read over the resolution, the earlier version and this one, and one thing I find that's missing, and has there been any discussion about ensuring meeting dietary needs? One suggestion that was very short, had a lot of carbs, no proteins. When I looked at the suggested week menu, or a sample possible menu, that was not the case. But there seems to be just a total lack of emphasis on nutritional needs.
Well, so the actual menus would be dependent on each camp and each cook. And in the questions asked there, it's pretty emphasized that the cooks would always meet individualized needs as far as allergies or dietary restrictions. So the resolution is calling for primarily plant-based options, but that wouldn't preclude there being specific items for individuals. As far as the nutritional needs, I think I don't think we have any close study right now of what our menus are offering as far as carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. We've never done that kind of analysis. But I think most food items have, to meet the USDA protein requirements, those would be met through many items. So yeah, I can't speak to what exact menu items would be, but.
Yeah, I know it can be done. For several years when I was in Colorado, we rented a campground from a Seventh-day Adventist, and they provided all of our meals for us. All of them were vegetarian meals, and they were delicious, wonderful meals. But they really had a different flavor than the sample menu that was suggested in the materials.
Yeah, so there are a couple of sample menus now in the final packet, and there were different ones submitted before, but that has been lifted up several times. The Seventh-day Adventists are another faith community that we have used facilities currently and in the past in other mission centers. And so there are certainly people out there who can help us do this if adopted, or if any cook wants to. Yeah, the training is available for that. Okay, I see a hand from Debbie.
Yeah, I have a question on the materials that we got previously. There was some sample menus, but there's no comparisons and prices. And I know working with MSU Extension, there is a large difference between going, non-meat or high protein versus what they're offering in that sample menu. I think it would be helpful if there was a comparison between with the examples that they presented cost-wise, so people can see that transitioning to the plant-based options is going to be a bit more expensive than the menu that we've currently have, and the cooks are going to have to be very talented to make it palatable for children. So I'm just wondering if there can be a price comparison so people can see the cost between the plant-based and what we've had in the past. I think that would be very informative.
Yeah, thank you, Debbie. I don't think that'll be available by conference. I don't know that any work's been done on that. I would say that switching from a meat item to a plant-based meat replacement at this point, I know would be more expensive, but in some menu items, simply not having the meat as an added menu item would be a cost reduction. So I know the discussion in the Earth Stewardship team The thought has been that overall there would be a cost neutral or hoped for a cost neutral position by, for example, having spaghetti sauce without ground beef in it. That just removes a menu item, which allows some of the budget to maybe purchase a higher cost item somewhere else in the menu. So that's been the general dialogue, but no, we don't have those specific numbers from the team. And that may be a consideration for you as delegates. I would also lift up that to that point, the transition is what's listed here. And so there is no set date or timeline on every meal being transitioned or how that would take place. And I think the expectation is that cook training and sourcing of foods, menu items will take time. It wouldn't be accomplished necessarily in one summer. I will add, and we may have it in the full packet if there's time, but we did just receive the summer camp reunion materials, and the theme is focused on restoring the earth as a restoration imperative. And the focus of day 3 will be on food choices and how they impact the climate. So this is something we'll be talking about at our family camps that are following the World Church Resources throughout the U.S. Are there any other questions about the resolution? Laretha?
You have spoken twice now about training for the cooks. Do you have any idea in mind how that would go about, how we would do that?
Not specifically. The thought is we could start with menu items that simply could essentially be the same item with just removing an ingredient. Like I mentioned spaghetti, maybe a pizza. You could still make pizza without the topping. So that would be one menu item you could transition without any training, really. It would just be removing the item. And so that's how we envisioned, as we talked about as a team, was we could start with that, and then we could talk about have within our own group cooks share, I make this dish this way, that's already on your menu. And then over time, we could also get some of that expertise from groups like Seventh-day Adventists or, other local people who could take us down the road to get, to 100%. So that's how we kind of envisioned it. Was we know there's some things that could easily be done. There's some things that could probably just require a different recipe. And then long-term, it's just adding to our list of options and then getting other people to help us out. We have partnered with Veg Michigan. That's a statewide group that does promotion of vegetarian, vegan lifestyles. They have offered us some sample products before, and they have people who've done some training. We did that at one of our spring conferences. They offered some things. So that is the one identified partner group in Michigan that we've worked with. But I'm sure there are others we could find.
Thank you.
Donnie Toth?
Yeah, there's this is, I guess, kind of a minor point, and this is preliminary, of course, but there's a difference between the meat versus the dairy and eggs as far as earth stewardship goes. The meat comes from cattle or pigs that are more that impact the earth more than, say, eggs do from even free what do you call it, non-caged chickens. So I think that's something that needs to be considered also when we're talking about the plant-based options versus meat or dairy or eggs. So I just wanted to make that point.
Yeah, thank you for lifting that up. I think that does just illustrate, that the complexity of this, and that we did provide some of those charts for you to look at in the packet from our stewardship team from the United Nations and others. So what Donnie was talking about, the kind of the amount of emissions, methane and carbon impacts from animal agriculture down to dairy to fish, poultry, eggs, etc. And then I think some people, when we see plant-based options, think only of the meat substitute. So replacing ground beef with a Impossible or Beyond, one of those brand names. The concept here is not to say we're replacing that with a plant-based substitute, but to say the menu is plant-based, ideally meaning that we're finding out the ways to prepare those dishes as others have, so that they're simply using the whole ingredients ideally and not having those other things. So that will take time in training. The menu or the resolution also offers up that meat, dairy, eggs, and other products would possibly still be used, but sparingly and with responsible, local sources. So getting then into those details to know what's the easiest way to reduce emissions, what's the next level, that would be the training that would take place over time. Seeing a couple chats, let me catch up with those. There's a suggestion here, Boyne Falls schools change their food to a healthy fare, still staying within budget. The local chef prepared the menu and standard food staffing. All menus were locally obtained, so maybe reach out to them. And then a question, has there been communication with the youth camp inspectors? If we go to non-USDA approved food. So we have not talked to any of the camping consultants. I don't think there'd be any expectation that anything we offer would be non-USDA approved. We don't fall under the school lunch program unless we offer that. We did try that one year, several years ago, which required us to fall under the school lunch health guidelines. Those can still be met with plant-based options. I know my child's school has an offering every day for that. And we've heard from people in the dialogue about schools, universities, band camps, et cetera, that are doing that. So I think that would go to the point of, as we transition items, we have to make sure they are meeting the balance requirements nutritionally. But I guess I would just say that our menus are not inspected because we're not using a food program. They just ask that we have a menu that has a balanced diet. Okay, I don't see any other questions on that. So it's planned then after those reports, we will take a brief recess about halfway through our morning business session, allow people to stretch and use the facilities. If we do have a ballot needed, so if we have more than 5 nominees for any of the campground boards, and we've sent that out earlier in the meeting, then before we go to the recess, we'd ask for any final questions. And during this about 10 to 15 minute period, we try to get all the final ballots cast for those. When we come back to order, we will then move into special orders, items that need to take place every year. Hopefully we'd have the campground boards finalized, we'd announce those. Then I would turn the chair over to our field apostle for sustaining the Mission Center president and financial officer appointments. The recommendations from the First Presidency and Bishopric are to continue with myself as MCP and Jessica as MCFO. The Apostles' recommendation for Invitation Support Minister will stay as Linda Stanbridge. And so Locke will guide you through those 3 sustaining decisions. And then I will offer the list of Mission Center leaders. And that was in the preparation packet so far. There are a couple of council member positions still to be determined. So if you're in one of those groups and might be interested in visiting congregations, and don't see someone listed for your area yet, or know someone who might be good in that role, please let me know. And then our final two items on the agenda are two resolutions that were submitted by congregations. The first resolution is from the Boyne City congregation. Resolved that the Mission Center rescind the Mission Center organization rules requiring a delegate conference and open all conferences to all members in the Michigan Mission Center. And in the packet, we've listed the current rules for delegates and alternates and provided the delegate numbers for conferences since 2015. You'll also see the credentials report this year. So have all that information. This is saying mission centers, according to church bylaws, have the option to have delegate conferences. The Michigan Mission Center always has since it's forming in 2011, but we don't need to. So this is proposing to rescind those rules and just have a general open conference in the future. Any questions you'd like to ask about for this resolution? Debbie?
How would this affect for voting? I mean, how, if anyone is able to come in as a delegate, so to speak, or just all members as participants, when it comes to anything that needs to be voted on, how would that be set up? Because obviously some will be Zoom and others will not, to be able to get an adequate vote against any resolutions or businesses.
So procedurally, I think we would use our same systems. Anybody who comes in person would have a voting device, and anybody who's online would have to connect individually by Zoom and use our poll. And then our ballot system would stay the same. I'd have to register and we'd send it out. So I think our systems would all work. At any scale, the costs will be different, and we'd have to potentially have a bigger Zoom room, a bigger ballot, more voting devices, but those are the only unknowns. So from my perspective, I think our systems could apply. We would still probably ask for advanced registration. We may have to require registration to be further out in advance. So right now, you can register really right up to the day of conference because we have the list of delegates already finite. We know there's 357 delegates or something like that. So even if you haven't registered, we know to expect you. If we didn't have that, in theory, all 12,000 people listed in Shelby could vote, and we'd have to somehow try to estimate, how many people would come, or require just administratively that you register 4 weeks in advance or something, so we know how to prepare how many voting devices, et cetera. So I think we have to change our registration timeline, but it could still be open to everyone, I believe. Do you have an estimated number of potential open participants? So I think if you're asking for this year, the delegate body, I do have those numbers. I don't think I have them printed out in front of me, but I can get them. When I last checked, we had roughly 60, maybe 70 seats open from congregations under the current rules. So there were about, I want to say 70 estimated. I could get the exact numbers for this year. And we had 40 or so alternates reported. So we still have 30 open seats as of this time under the current rules. There were 3 congregations that are still at the point where they've maximized their number of people possible. So Sheboygan, Grayling, and Spiral all had their maximum number of people they could appoint, meaning they have their pastor CFO, they've elected their number of delegates, and they've elected their number of alternates. I don't know if they had additional people who wanted to serve, but those are the three who filled their maximum allocation. Every other congregation could have reported more alternates, and we do have open seats for them at this time. In the packet, the numbers that were printed there were as of October 12th. The total delegate body was 394. At that time, there were 76 seats open and 35 alternates who were reported, and they've all been seated. Those numbers have changed just a little bit since then, but how many potential participants if there were not delegates? Okay, so that would be the total membership. And let's see. Got that printed. I don't have that on the report, but there are roughly 12,000 members in the Michigan Mission Center. I do have on the delegate list every congregation's totals. And then there are 915 non-resident and 3,783 general members. So in total, in Shelby, roughly there are 12,000 members in Michigan. Certainly we wouldn't have 12,000 people at a conference, but there, could be 500, 1,000. I think, from my perspective, just being involved in the last 10 years and reading minutes from regional conferences prior to this, when there wasn't a delegate policy, typical conference numbers are probably what we're, experiencing now after decline, and that would probably continue into the future. Again, currently only 3 congregations potentially have people who wanted to be a delegate who couldn't be for this year under these rules. Now, in years where we have a more controversial topic, such as selling campgrounds or something to that effect, could we have many more people attend? That's very likely, I think, if it was a more controversial item coming up. But in a typical year, I would expect, whether we have a delegate policy or not, many of the same people would attend and our numbers would be relatively the same. So I think that's probably the key question is, do we want to restrict representation to this proportional kind of system, which could be changed to different proportions, or do we want the open concept, which technically wouldn't be predictable? The other point to that, I think, and I've seen through previous regional conferences and stories, is that similar to what sometimes happens in congregations, is that one year a certain group of people can come and vote a certain leader or item in, and then the next year a different group of people can come and vote a different path, and the same question can go back and forth based on who attends each year and who turns out voters, so to speak. Not that that's good or bad, it's just those are the options. Any other questions about rescinding the delegate policies? Move on then to look at resolution 4. This is submitted by the Coleman congregation. There are several whereas statements. The resolved paragraph that the Michigan Mission Center consider moving the annual conference to a larger facility that is centrally located in the state and which is able to accommodate a body of members and friends that would be consistent from previous years when the conferences were centrally located. And again, the additional information from resolution 3 kind of helps note here the size of the conference. And also we added the Blue Water campground information for our current location, so you're aware of that. Any questions about resolution 4? Laretha?
If I recall, last time that we were at Saginaw, we had a terrible, terrible time trying to find a place to meet. And that's why we ended up where we are. So does that mean that searching out will be the same type of thing, that most facilities either are way too expensive or not large enough? How does that, I mean, how is that? Oh, I agree with, being more central. I agree with that. But does that put a burden then upon us to find that facility?
We don't know availability. So yeah, our last conference at Saginaw Valley was 2019. We weren't able to meet in 2020 because of the pandemic, so we just couldn't gather, and they weren't having gatherings at all. In 21, I don't believe we had gathering restrictions at that time. The university, I think, was, when we were trying to schedule it early 21, the university was still under gathering restrictions and not having outside groups at all. And so that's where, and we were planning to have a hybrid conference for the first time because of the pandemic. And so that's when we thought it would be best to just do our own facility where we can get in early and set up, and we didn't need as large a facility, we knew, because people will be joining online. So we haven't tried since then, because it worked here and the sizes were appropriate. We haven't looked for any availability or prices since then. So I couldn't speak to that. Yes, I mean, this is not saying it has to, it's the resolution is consider moving the conference to a larger facility. So if it's adopted as staff, we will absolutely look for, whatever conference centers, high schools, auditoriums in the central part of the state that could accommodate our group.
Thank you.
And I would say that it may not be for the next year just because of that availability. So it might be 2 years out because places are booked ahead for these kinds of large events. Debbie?
My question, I think you might have answered it, was that had any consideration but put to the location that they consider central? Is it central to the state? Is it central to the conference delegates? I mean, there's a lot. I mean, you're going to miss people from northern, UP. If you have it farther down, it might be why there's not a lot coming from the UP. And cost wise, I mean, we all know what it's like to rent something that isn't ours. So I just wondered if any consideration, any suggestions that this group might have had when they presented this proposal. And where are we in terms of cost? I mean, how is that going to encumber where we meet? I agree, I'm from northern Michigan, and that's a long way for me to come, but we have to look at the price cost wise too.
Yeah, that's not mentioned in the whereas paragraphs from the congregation. So, that'll have to come up in the discussion. There is no cost information. I do think it'll depend on, again, what we want. So, and we changed our reservation at Saginaw Valley over the years. We started out with from Friday night to Sunday morning and lots of snacks and other things. And over time said, well, we probably don't need to pay for that. We probably don't need this room. We probably don't need that, and pared it down to different things. And we were looking at different spots even within Saginaw Valley before the pandemic hit. So to adjust costs and better suit our needs. In the past, schools were rented, so it could be anything from a one-day Saturday only event in a gym probably pretty relatively low cost to a full weekend experience with a, maybe an auditorium and different things. So I think those options would all be on the table. This resolution isn't calling for anything exact. It doesn't have a definition of centrally located in the state. That's the language. We do have it's referred to as a heat map that was prepared by the consultants in the campground study process leading up to 2015. That's the most detailed item we have. They took all of our Shelby data. I have to go look, but they took thousands of member addresses from Shelby, I believe all of them from our database, put it into a geographic mapping system and took all the points, and we're able to find where is the membership weighted, not just geographically, where is the middle point, but where is the membership weighted middle point. And it, we'll try to pull that graphic, but it was somewhere in the Mount Pleasant to Sanford, Midland kind of area. So where we would expect mid-Michigan typically is identified. So those cities in that area are probably looking at Mount Pleasant, Clare, Midland area, but it wouldn't have to exactly be there. I think conferences moved around in that general area of the state. So those would all be options. Again, as staff, we'll just have to be determined on our calendar for fall conference. And we want to hear, from the body on resolution 3 and 4, what your thoughts are, and we'll listen to the debate and the outcomes, and we'll go from there to schedule our options. Will it be a delegate conference, and does the group want it in a central location? And then we'll do our best to find something that meets our financial constraints and our needs. So yeah, we don't have a position on either of these, but there was a question with negative operating budget, is additional cost projection truly a viable consideration? I think that's referring to the conference. So the negative budget I mentioned was the Mission Center operating budget. Go back to that slide. And the conference itself is not directly impacted in the operating budget. So staff time and stuff certainly does apply, but the fall conference costs themselves for our facilities and meal and items we have for the conference itself has a separate fund. Starting the end of 2022, that balance was $8,523.54. In most recent years, even when we were at Saginaw Valley, our fall conference budget was met by the donations that week or shortly after. And usually we had excess funds that we were able to give to some other Mission Center need or World Church need from fall conferences. So in the past, people have generously responded to cover that weekend costs, however it's been designed. We did have a fee charge for conferences in the past when we went to Saginaw Valley. At times there was a fee you had to pay in order to register and attend. And so that's a model we could use. Again, that does require more staff time, and we've gone to generosity model that has been working and that I think could still work at another location. But it wouldn't, so yeah, that doesn't apply to the operating budget. Okay, I don't see any other questions on resolution 4. Well, that would be the end of the action items then. So I just a couple of points here. If you have any proposed amendments, very helpful if you can submit them by email to me so that we can get them ready to project, have them in the minutes, state them, get them corrected so they're in order, all of those things. So if you have any proposed amendments you plan to make, please send them along. I know some things will come up during the conference you can't plan for, but even then, if you have an amendment you'd like to move, if you can type it out, send it in the chats, or put it in person here, that's very helpful. As far as advance, you can do that is helpful. And then if you have any questions about other motions or any procedural things, you can contact me during this coming week so we can talk through those. It's always helpful for you and the body to do that before the meeting's in progress. Catherine Williamson.
Yes, I'm sorry, I was trying to type a chat question about this. And this does have to do with resolution 4. I know that their concern from the congregation that submitted the proposal was that because we no longer meet in person as such, as a conference, that we don't have the same connections and we don't, it's not the same as seeing people face to face. And I certainly understand that. My question is, did they have any thoughts on whether it would continue to be a hybrid conference, or were they thinking that they would want it to be only in person as we used to be before the pandemic?
That wasn't stated there. I haven't heard anything beyond the resolution from them. So because that's not stated, and not my sense that it would be an in-person only conference. I believe it would continue as a hybrid. That would be my thought, unless that's added to the resolution or is very clear through the debate that that's what people want. I think beyond just participation, there are some people with mobility challenges or other situations where they would want to participate, and I'm guessing there would be frustration if that wasn't an option now that we have learned how to do it.
Yes, that was my concern as well.
And then the
Thank
other,
you, Dan.
yeah, the other consideration is the World Conference resolution asking us to reduce carbon emissions. And so again, requiring everyone to attend, I think would oppose that, or expecting everyone to attend every year versus people coming when it's possible for them. And
Okay, thank you, Dan.
all right, so we've just looked at the resolved statements and the basic business items. We have plenty of time this morning. If you want to go further into any details of the conference items, if you want to look at the conference website or any of the additional packets, or there's any other questions you have about conference as far as participating, I will just briefly bring up, get it here, to share the fall conference webs page so you can see that. Hopefully you're familiar with it. Been there, but we put this out everywhere. This is where we try to gather everything. So next weekend, fall conference, our scripture. Already got the preparation. You've already registered, but anyone who hasn't is there. I will update the reported list of delegates next week once we get most current reports. You can read that. Youth activities, again, register by today if you're planning to come in person and want to have your youth in the childcare. Nominations can still be submitted to get on the ballot. Our overall schedule is here. The links here for Zoom in the open sessions will be added. And the links to Facebook for those who are guests during the business session. The business items we just went through, but the full pages for all of them are down here, so you can read the additional resolution 2 information is there. Yes, that didn't save yesterday. I had the inspection report. I'll get that posted. The only other item to come will be the full packet of documents that'll have reports. There won't be any other action items added. And then also you've got past conference minutes there. Let's open it up to any other questions about conference you'd like to ask. Okay, there's been some time then to get the ballots. Has anybody seen the ballot come in their email? See, someone did receive it, went to their spam folder, so yeah, that can happen. Check your junk folder, your spam folder. Not a trusted sender, it's not someone you usually hear from. So that means it is going out. Hopefully you'll get it soon. Again, you have all week to try the sample ballot. If you don't see it in your email by the end of today, it probably should be there already. So if you don't see it, send me an email. I will look in our system to see what might have happened. As far as I know, all our email addresses were correct. Anything else you'd like to ask or talk about this morning? See anything, so I will say thank you for coming this morning. Appreciate your time. If you have further questions, amendments, anything, please send them my way. I'm going to stop the recording, but I will stay on the session if anybody has individual questions or you want to try speaking or voting or anything like that. I'm just remembering we had the question about a poll, so I'll put up another poll for anybody who wants to try that again after we stop the recording and see if it works this time for you. That'll take me just a couple of seconds to, well, I can probably use the same poll again, I think. Yeah, so there's our poll. It's launched again. If you want to try that and make sure it works for you, I'll stay on, but otherwise you're welcome to disconnect, and I'll wish you blessings for the weekend.